Hey folks, so I have noticed a number of videos newly floating around YouTube in recent days, opining, usually in the negative, about the recent 200 best guitar list from Rolling Stone, which of course is a populist publication dealing with the higher echelons of commercial music rather than anything explorative or innovative. So it's to be expected, isn't it? It would be rather a sort of high school popularity competition of guitarists, I should say. I know Rick Beato and several other channels have taken umbrage with the picks, and not so much who they've picked, but who they've left out of that list. There's some amazing guitarists that are not even in the top 200 of that list, which of course is a mortal sin in the guitar world, to have a list and leave such names off of it. However, we need to remember that all such lists are subjective, and when we sort of talk about a competitive quality of guitar players, they all have such different styles, different techniques, play different guitars. It's really hard sometimes to put them in competition with each other. I've done videos in the past myself on such guitar lists. I think I even went over a list a few months ago and talked about how people sort of pander to the usual picks. There's a sort of an accepted canon in the guitarist world, and as you can see from this latest Rolling Stone list, they strayed somewhat from that canon and have caught flack for it. Now, of course, Rolling Stone, appealing to populism, are going to pick a lot of guitarists from bands or playing for artists that are, producing lots of money, notoriety, are in the public eye. So they've probably gone for guitar players who are influential in other ways other than technique and prowess. That's because that's their angle, that's their, line of production. Is they're not necessarily a guitar magazine or even a rock magazine. It's more of a sort of celebrity culture of music. Who's hot, who's blowing up, who's getting the most attention. So they're coming at it from that perspective. It's a little bit annoying sometimes when people do that. They judge by album sales rather than any sort of qualitative aspects, and of course it's going to leave off lots of people. I've made my own points that you go through 9, 10, 11, 12 guitar lists of people, and you never see guitar players like Mike Oldfield or people, all the great guitarists from the prog bands in the 70s, all that great French prog, German prog, what do they call it? Krautrock, unfortunately. Lots of great guitarists from that period. You never hear them mentioned. You never hear their names come up. There's always going to be people who get overlooked because this is highly subjective. I know people that all their lives have felt like Jimi Hendrix is the greatest guitar player that's ever lived. And they won't sway from that. They'll go to the grave with that opinion, simply because at the time he took guitar playing and innovated it to such an extent to where it changed it forever. After his tenure as a performing musician, things weren't the same. He advanced the craft so much. So did people like Van Halen. But there are other people who judge sort of retrospectively and think, yeah, Hendrix was absolutely brilliant for his period, but in terms of today's technique, he's not even in the top 10 anymore. So there's different ways of looking at this. You can do it sort of in a hagiography, historiography kind of way, where you take into consideration what was available at the time in terms of guitar, in terms of quality of instrument, in terms of amplification, in terms of how many effects people had access to. You get a guy like Django Reinhardt, obviously, who doesn't have a rack of effects or a pedal board to work with. So he's producing tone purely with his fingers. And then you get a guy like The Edge, who relies completely upon technology. And there's people now that make The Edge look like a boring acoustic player in terms of what they do, combining technology with playing. So, you're never going to get people to agree. It's always going to be subjective. You're always going to find fault with everybody's list because it's such a highly personal thing. What I look for in a guitar player does not match probably what most of you look for. We might have some similar elements in our thinking, but when I hear something that I think is absolutely brilliant and it inspires me to go play or listen to more of that artist, it may not be the same thing that draws you, or you might hear that same piece of music and it just washes by you without really making much impact. So I mean, it could be guitar tone, it could be, the way a person approaches the rudiments of music, like scales, arpeggios, certain theoretic things. Those of you who love Holdsworth and players of that, and McLaughlin and players of that ilk, are probably theory nerds. You read charts, you know all your chords, you know all your scales and arpeggios and modes. But those of you who are drawn to, some of the great blues players of the past, like Stevie Ray Vaughan, those things aren't as important. It's more about feel, tone, the sort of dynamics. You're playing the same pentatonic scale most of the time, but there's a way of sort of using that tool and the way that you augur it in the music that you find particularly impressive. So yeah, it's kind of a waste of time, isn't it, to sort of get worked up about these things. I'm sure there'll be another big publication in the future that will put out another such list, whether it be guitar players, piano players, singers, groups, and we're going to see a flurry of other videos, sort of criticizing the choices. But that's sort of what makes music interesting, isn't it? If we all just pandered to the same criteria all the time, I don't think it would be as riveting as it is. So, I always take a look at these lists, chuckle to myself at some of the choices, but I'm not going to get that worked up about it because I'm sure my lists, if I were to publish such a thing, people would find fault with and be surprised at as well, and they would come up with all kinds of guitarists I'd left off of that particular list. When you think about all the brilliant guitar players in the world, it probably is now numbers in the thousands. People that you don't know about, people that are absolute wizards on YouTube that you've not discovered yet, might make it on someone's list because they have discovered it. So there's just all sorts of reasons to why no one's ever going to faithfully produce your opinion in making such a list, and you're always going to have differences. But so be it. Bring it on. Let's see your lists. All right.